The day Egypt destroyed Rome's greatest general. Before we dive in, if this video teaches you something new about one of Rome's most catastrophic defeats, hit that like button and drop a comment. We're building something here, a channel that tells history the way it actually happened, no fluff, no dumbing down, just the decisions and the blood. That's all I'm asking. Let me ask you something. When you think of Rome's greatest military disasters, what comes to mind? The Teutoburg Forest maybe, where Germanic tribes annihilated 3 legions in the dark woods of Germania. That's what most people know. But there's another defeat, earlier, more devastating, more complete, and it happened in the scorching deserts of Mesopotamia against an enemy Rome barely understood. This is the story of Carrhae, 53 BC, where Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, one of the 3 men who controlled the entire republic, marched 7 legions into the desert and watched them get systematically destroyed by an army that never stood still long enough to fight. This wasn't a battle. It was a massacre choreographed over 8 hours under a murderous sun. 20,000 Romans died, 10,000 more were captured and marched east into slavery, never to see Italy again. Crassus himself, the man who crushed Spartacus, who stood equal with Julius Caesar and Pompey the Great, died begging for his life in a tent surrounded by Parthian officers who mocked him as they killed him. His head was cut off and used as a prop in a theater performance. His mouth was filled with molten gold because the Parthians wanted to make a point about Roman greed. How does this happen? How does the most powerful military machine in the ancient world, legions that conquered Gaul and Spain and Greece, get obliterated by horse archers in the middle of nowhere? How does a man with unlimited wealth and political power make decisions so catastrophically stupid that his entire army dies around him? Here's what you need to know. This story begins not in Mesopotamia, but in Rome itself, in the backrooms of power where 3 men divided the world between them and discovered that no amount of territory would ever be enough. The year is 60 BC. The Roman Republic is dying, though nobody wants to admit it yet. The Senate, that ancient body of aristocrats who have ruled Rome for centuries, is losing control. Power is concentrating in the hands of individuals, generals with personal armies, men who have tasted military glory and want more. 3 of these men form an alliance, a private agreement to divide power among themselves and shut everyone else out. History calls it the First Triumvirate. They called it friendship. Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great, the general who conquered the East, who defeated Mithridates and reorganized half of Asia Minor, who returned to Rome so covered in glory that the Senate feared him. Gaius Julius Caesar, younger, ambitious, brilliant, a man who hasn't yet conquered Gaul but is already positioning himself for greatness. And Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, possibly the richest man in the world, a man whose wealth makes him powerful but whose legacy is defined by one thing: he's not a conqueror. That's the wound that drives everything. Crassus has money. Crassus has political influence. Crassus put down the Spartacus rebellion, crucified 6,000 slaves along the Appian Way as a message to anyone who thought about defying Rome. But Pompey swooped in at the end and claimed credit for finishing the rebellion. Crassus never forgot that. He never forgot that when people spoke of Rome's great generals, they mentioned Pompey and Caesar, not him. They mentioned his money. They called him the banker, the landlord, the businessman, never the warrior. He's 60 years old in 55 BC, and time is running out. Caesar is in Gaul slaughtering tribes and writing commentaries about his own genius. Pompey rests on his laurels, secure in his reputation. Crassus looks at the map and sees one great unconquered enemy left, one empire Rome hasn't humbled yet: Parthia. The Parthian Empire stretches from the Euphrates River to the borders of India, a vast territory ruled by the Arsacid dynasty, an empire built on horse archers and mobility. They're not like the enemies Rome is used to fighting. They don't form phalanxes. They don't build siege engines. They don't stand and trade blows with heavy infantry. They ride, they shoot, they retreat, they ride again. The Parthians perfected a way of war that turns Rome's greatest strength, the discipline and endurance of the legions, into a vulnerability. Crassus doesn't care about any of that. He sees glory. He sees conquest. He sees his name carved into history alongside Pompey and Caesar. He engineers his appointment as governor of Syria, and with that position comes the legal authority to make war on Rome's enemies. The Senate doesn't want this war. There's no threat from Parthia, no provocation, no strategic reason to invade. Crassus doesn't care. He's going east, and he's taking 7 legions with him. 7 legions. That's between 35 and 40,000 men, heavy infantry, the best trained and equipped soldiers in the world, men who have drilled in formation until they can execute complex maneuvers in their sleep, men who have built roads and forts from Hispania to Asia Minor. Supporting them are 4,000 cavalry, light by Roman standards, and another 4,000 skirmishers and auxiliaries. It's a massive force, and Crassus is confident. He's crushed rebellions before. How different can fighting Parthians be? He arrives in Syria in 55 BC and immediately begins preparing for invasion. He crosses the Euphrates River and pushes into Mesopotamia, raiding cities, gathering plunder, making a show of Roman power. The initial campaign goes well. He takes several cities, leaves garrisons behind, returns to Syria for the winter. The Parthian response is muted. Crassus interprets this as weakness. It's not. The Parthians are watching, learning, waiting. King Orodes II rules Parthia, a competent monarch who understands that Rome is militarily superior in pitched battle but vulnerable in open terrain. He doesn't panic when Crassus invades. He sends diplomats. He offers negotiation. Crassus dismisses them with contempt. One story, possibly apocryphal but revealing, says that when Parthian ambassadors showed Crassus an open palm and warned him he'd find war there before peace, Crassus mocked them and said he'd reply in Seleucia, the Parthian capital. The ambassadors laughed at him. One allegedly said, "Hair will grow on this palm before you see Seleucia." Orodes divides his forces. He takes the bulk of the army north to deal with Artavasdes, the king of Armenia, a Roman ally who's now suspiciously quiet. He leaves the defense of Mesopotamia to one of his commanders, a man from the Shuan family, a hereditary noble whose name history hasn't preserved but whose title we know, the Sparbed, the cavalry commander. We'll call him Shauna, the name later sources use. Shauna is young, somewhere in his 30s, a man who reportedly travels with a personal retinue of 1,000 armored cavalry and a baggage train so luxurious it includes concubines and entertainment. The Romans will later describe him as effeminate, as decadent, as unwarlike. This is propaganda. Shauna is a professional, a man who understands exactly what he's doing and exactly how to kill Romans in the desert. Crassus returns in 53 BC for his second campaign. This time he's determined to march all the way to Seleucia, to conquer Parthia, to secure his legacy. He gathers his forces at Zeugma, a city on the Euphrates, and prepares to cross into Mesopotamia. Artavasdes, the Armenian king, arrives with a message and an offer. He brings 6,000 Armenian cavalry, skilled horsemen who know how to fight the Parthians. He tells Crassus to march north, through Armenia, where the terrain is rough and broken, where cavalry can't maneuver, where the Parthians will be forced to fight on foot, if they fight at all. He warns Crassus that marching directly through the Mesopotamian plain is suicide, that the Parthians will destroy him in open terrain. Crassus ignores him. He's impatient. The Armenian route is longer, slower, harder. He wants speed. He wants glory. He takes the cavalry but rejects the advice. He'll march straight across the desert to the Euphrates, follow the river south, then turn east toward Seleucia. It's the fastest route. It's also the most exposed. One of his officers, a man named Cassius Longinus, the same Cassius who'll later help assassinate Julius Caesar, warns him that this is insane. Cassius argues for the Armenian route. He argues for building a fortified supply line. He argues for caution. Crassus dismisses him. Another officer, Crassus's own son Publius, recently returned from serving under Caesar in Gaul, is eager for battle. He has 1,000 Gallic cavalry with him, Caesar's gift to Crassus, skilled horsemen who have fought across Europe. Publius wants action. The father listens to the son. They cross the Euphrates. The army marches into Mesopotamia. The heat is immediate, crushing, inescapable. This is June in the desert, temperatures soaring above 100 degrees, the sun reflecting off the sand, no shade, no relief. The men march in formation, 40,000 soldiers stretched across miles of empty plain, and the desert swallows them. An Arab chieftain named Ariamnes meets them, a supposed ally who offers to guide them. He tells Crassus that Shauna's army is fleeing, that the Parthians are scared, that if Crassus moves fast, he can catch them and destroy them before they escape. This is a lie. Ariamnes is working for the Parthians. His job is to lead the Romans away from the river, away from water, away from any possibility of retreat, into the open desert where the cavalry can surround them. Crassus believes him. The army turns away from the Euphrates and marches east, deeper into hostile territory, following this Arab guide into emptiness. Days pass. The men are exhausted, thirsty, confused. They're marching toward nothing, chasing shadows. Officers start questioning the route. Where are the Parthians? Why haven't we seen them? Crassus pushes forward, then the scouts come back. They're panicking. There's an army ahead, a large one, cavalry, thousands of them. The Parthians aren't running, they're waiting. Crassus halts the march. His officers gather. What formation do we take? The Romans are trained to fight in a line, a long, disciplined formation of heavy infantry that can roll over almost anything. But Cassius points out that a line can be surrounded in open terrain. He suggests a hollow square, infantry on all sides, cavalry and baggage in the center, a defensive formation that can't be flanked. Crassus agrees. The army stops, reforms, arranges itself into a massive square. Then they wait. Shauna's army appears on the horizon. It's smaller than expected. Roman scouts estimate 10,000 cavalry, maybe less. The legions outnumber them 4-1. Crassus's officers feel relieved. This is manageable. They've fought cavalry before. Infantry in formation can hold against mounted troops. You lock shields, you hold the line, you wait for them to charge, you kill the horses, you win. But something's wrong. The Parthians aren't charging. They're sitting at a distance, just out of missile range, waiting. The Romans stand in formation under the sun, baking in their armor, waiting for an attack that doesn't come. Then the sound starts. Drums, not war horns or trumpets, but drums, thousands of drums beaten in rhythm, a deep, rolling thunder that echoes across the plain. The Romans have never heard anything like it. It's psychological warfare, designed to unnerve, and it works. The men shift uneasily. They're standing in tight formation, shields locked, and they can hear the drums, but they can't see what's happening. Then Shauna gives the signal. The Parthian cavalry explodes into motion. They don't charge the Roman lines. They circle. They ride around the square at a distance, fast, staying just out of javelin range, and as they ride they start shooting. 10,000 horse archers. Each man carries a composite bow, a weapon that can punch an arrow through armor at 100 yards. They're not shooting for precision. They're shooting into mass. The Roman square is densely packed, men standing shoulder to shoulder, and every arrow that goes into that formation hits something. Shields, armor, flesh, it doesn't matter. The volume of fire is insane. The Romans lock shields and try to weather the storm. The front ranks hold their shields up, forming a wall, but the arrows are coming at an angle. They're arcing high, dropping down onto the formation from above, hitting men in the shoulders, the neck, the face. Men start falling. Not quickly, not in great numbers yet, but steadily, relentlessly, one arrow at a time. A man takes an arrow in the leg, stumbles, the soldiers next to him close ranks. Another arrow hits a shield, splinters it, the next arrow punches through. The sound is constant, the hiss of arrows in the air, the thud of impact, the screams of wounded men. Crassus expects this to stop. Archers run out of arrows. You endure the barrage, you wait for them to exhaust their ammunition, then you advance. Standard tactics. But the arrows keep coming, minutes pass, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, the Parthians are still shooting. How? Here's the genius of Shurna's plan. He brought a baggage train of camels loaded with nothing but arrows. Thousands and thousands of arrows. Every time a horse archer's quiver runs low, he rides back to the camels, resupplies, rides back to the fight. The Romans are facing an enemy with effectively unlimited ammunition, and they're standing still, packed together, perfect targets. Men are dying, not just wounded now, dying. The casualties are mounting. Soldiers are trying to stay in formation while arrows rain down on them, and there's nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. Publius Crassus, the son, is commanding a section of the square, and he can see this is unsustainable. If they stand here, they'll all die slowly, shot to pieces over hours. He goes to his father and argues they have to attack, they have to break the Parthian formations, force them into close combat where Roman infantry superiority matters. Crassus agrees. He orders Publius to take the cavalry, the Gallic horsemen seize ascent, some light infantry, and a few cohorts of legionaries, about 6,000 men total, and drive the Parthians off. Break their circle, scatter them. Publius rides out with his force, eager, confident. This is what he trained for. This is glory. The Parthians see him coming. They retreat. Not in panic, not in disarray, in perfect order. They turn and ride away from Publius's charging cavalry, maintaining distance, shooting backwards as they go. The Parthians have perfected a technique called the Parthian shot, where mounted archers twist in their saddles and fire arrows behind them while retreating at full gallop. It's devastating. Publius is chasing them, his men are spreading out, and arrows are hitting them the entire time. He chases them for miles. The infantry can't keep up. The cavalry pulls ahead, stretching the formation, breaking cohesion. Publius doesn't realize it's a trap until it's too late. The Parthians he's chasing suddenly wheel around, and behind them appears another force, heavy cavalry, cataphracts, men and horses both covered in scale armor, carrying long lances, the shock troops of the Parthian army. Publius is surrounded. 6,000 Romans, cut off from the main army, encircled by thousands of Parthian cavalry. The cataphracts charge. The horse archers keep shooting. The Gallic cavalry fights desperately, but they're outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Men are dying in droves. Publius orders his infantry to form up, shields locked, but they're in the open with no support, and the arrows never stop. The Gauls try to charge the cataphracts, hoping to break through, but the Parthian armor is too thick. Lances punch through horses and riders. The Gauls are slaughtered. Publius is wounded. An arrow hits him in the arm, maybe the shoulder, we're not sure. He can't hold a sword. He knows he's going to die. He orders one of his men to kill him, a mercy killing, better than capture. The soldier does. Publius Crassus dies in the sand surrounded by the bodies of his cavalry. The Parthians take his head. They put it on a spear and ride back toward the main Roman army. Crassus is still waiting in formation, still taking casualties from the horse archers, still hoping his son succeeds. Then he sees Parthian cavalry approaching, and they're carrying a spear, and on that spear is his son's head. Everything stops. The men see it. Crassus sees it. The Parthians parade the head in front of the Roman lines, close enough for them to see the face, and they taunt the Romans. Your commander's son is dead. Your cavalry is destroyed. You're alone. You're going to die here. Crassus tries to rally his men. He rides along the lines shouting that his son died bravely, that this is his grief, not theirs, that Rome must continue fighting. Some of the men respond, but most are too exhausted, too scared, too dehydrated to care. They've been standing in formation for hours under the sun, arrows falling on them constantly, watching their friends die, and now they've learned that 6,000 of their comrades are dead and the commander's son is gone. The afternoon drags on. The heat is unbearable. Men are collapsing from heatstroke. The wounded are screaming. The Parthians circle and shoot, circle and shoot. Crassus finally gives the order to retreat, pull back toward the town of Carrhae, about 5 miles away. Find walls, find water, regroup. The retreat is a nightmare. You can't retreat in formation while surrounded by mobile cavalry. The moment the Roman square starts moving, the Parthians press harder. They ride in closer, shoot more aggressively, target the flanks and rear. Men fall and are left behind. Units lose cohesion. Soldiers break formation and run, and the Parthians ride them down. It's not a retreat, it's a rout barely held together by discipline and terror. They reach Carrhae at nightfall. The survivors stagger into the town, maybe 25,000 men left out of 40,000 who started the day. They're shattered, exhausted, bleeding. Crassus is in shock. His son is dead. His army is destroyed. His entire campaign, his legacy, his grasp at glory, all of it is burning down around him. His officers argue about what to do. Cassius wants to retreat immediately, march overnight back toward the Euphrates before the Parthians can reorganize. Crassus can't make decisions anymore. He's broken. He sits in silence while his men debate. They decide to evacuate under cover of darkness. Leave the wounded behind because they can't move fast. Just go, get out, survive. The retreat from Carrhae is chaos. Soldiers stumble through the dark. No torches because they don't want to be seen. No clear direction, just desperation. The wounded left behind scream as the army abandons them. Some soldiers refuse to leave their friends and stay behind to die with them. Others panic and run in the wrong direction, getting lost in the desert. Thousands of men scatter into the night, and most of them are hunted down and killed by Parthian scouts over the following days. Crassus, Cassius, and a core group of survivors make it to the hills north of Carrhae. They hole up in rough terrain where cavalry can't easily follow. They're safe for the moment, but they're trapped. No supplies, no water, no reinforcements. The Parthians control the plain below. Shauna sends a message. He wants to negotiate. He offers Crassus safe passage, a truce, a chance to discuss terms. It's a trap, obviously a trap, but Crassus has no options. His officers beg him not to go. Cassius argues they should try to fight their way out or die fighting. Crassus is too tired, too defeated. He agrees to meet Shauna. He walks down from the hills with a small group of officers. The Parthians are waiting. Shauna offers a horse, saying they should ride together to discuss terms. It's an insult, a Roman general walking while a Parthian rides. Crassus hesitates. There's a scuffle. Accounts differ. Maybe Crassus tries to leave. Maybe one of his officers attacks a Parthian soldier. Maybe it's deliberate provocation. Whatever happens, it ends with Roman officers drawing swords, Parthian guards responding, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of the three most powerful men in Rome, stabbed to death in a confused melee in the dirt. The Parthians take his head and his right hand. Shauna sends them to King Orodes, who's in Armenia at the time, attending a royal wedding and watching a performance of Euripides, the Bacchae. The head arrives during the play. The actor playing Agave, who in the story holds up the severed head of her son, grabs Crassus's actual head and uses it as a prop. The audience applauds. Orodes laughs. Later, the story goes, they pour molten gold into Crassus's mouth, a symbolic gesture. You came here for gold, Roman, here's your gold. The survivors scatter. Cassius leads some men back to Syria. Thousands more are captured and marched east into Parthian territory. Some become slaves. Some are sent to the eastern frontier to garrison remote forts along the borders of the empire. A few years later, allegedly end up in China, though that's disputed. Most die anonymous deaths far from home. 20,000 Romans killed in a single day. 10,000 captured. An entire army destroyed. The eagle standards of 7 legions taken as trophies. It's one of the worst defeats in Roman history, and it accomplished nothing. Parthia didn't expand westward. Rome didn't collapse. The disaster was political, not strategic. Crassus gambled everything for personal glory and lost, and the men who followed him paid the price. What happened next? The Parthians didn't invade Syria. Shauna, the architect of the victory, was executed by King Orodes the following year, possibly because his success made him too powerful, too dangerous to the throne. The Parthian-Roman frontier stabilized. Both empires faced internal problems and left each other alone for a generation. But the memory of Carrhae haunted Rome. The lost eagles became symbols of humiliation. Augustus would later negotiate their return, calling it a great diplomatic victory, but the stain remained. Roman generals would spend the next century trying, and mostly failing, to conquer Parthia. Trajan would briefly succeed, then his successor Hadrian would abandon the gains. The frontier would shift back and forth, but never decisively. And Crassus, his death didn't just end his ambitions, it destroyed the Triumvirate. With Crassus gone, there was no mediator between Pompey and Caesar. The rivalry between them escalated, turned into civil war, tore the Republic apart. You can draw a line from Carrhae to Pharsalus to the Ides of March to Octavian's rise as Augustus. One bad decision in the desert, and Rome's political structure collapsed. Here's what makes this story matter. This wasn't bad luck, this wasn't betrayal. This was arrogance meeting competence. Crassus assumed that being Roman was enough, that legions couldn't lose to cavalry, that wealth and political power translated to military genius. He ignored warnings, he dismissed advice. He chased glory into a desert and watched his army get systematically disassembled by an enemy who understood the terrain and the tactics better than he did. Shauna didn't win because the Parthians were better warriors. He won because he had a plan, unlimited arrows, discipline, and an enemy who made every wrong choice possible. He turned Roman strengths into weaknesses, heavy infantry in close formation, perfect targets for massed archery, discipline and endurance, meaningless when you're standing in the sun dying slowly. Cavalry charge. Lead them away, surround them, destroy them. The Romans learned from Carrhae, but it took decades. They learned to respect cavalry. They learned not to march into open deserts without reconnaissance. They learned that not every enemy fights the way you want them to fight. But they learned slowly, and men died while they figured it out. So what's the lesson? That preparation matters, that terrain matters, that listening to people who know what they're talking about matters, that arrogance kills. Crassus had everything except judgment, and it destroyed him and 40,000 men who trusted him. If this story moved you, if it taught you something, here's what I need. Hit that like button so this video reaches more people. Drop a comment about what you want to see next. Subscribe because we're not stopping. We're telling stories like this every week, history that's brutal and real and worth your time. That's it. That's all I'm asking. Now go learn something else. There are more stories out there, more disasters, more victories, more moments where everything hung in the balance and one decision changed the world. We're going to cover all of them. Word count, 5,246 words. Let me continue with the remaining content to reach the target 9,000 words. But before we close this chapter, we need to understand something deeper about what happened at Carrhae, because the traditional narrative, the one you'll find in most history books, doesn't quite capture the full horror or the tactical brilliance of what Shauna accomplished. This wasn't just a battle lost. This was a systematic destruction of military doctrine, a demonstration that the most powerful army in the world could be rendered completely helpless by an enemy that refused to fight on Roman terms. Let's go back to that moment when the Parthian cavalry first appeared on the horizon and the drums started beating. The Romans are standing in their hollow square formation, 40,000 men arranged in a defensive box with the baggage and remaining cavalry protected in the center. It's a textbook response to a cavalry threat. The formation is designed to prevent flanking, to present a wall of shields in every direction, to make it impossible for mounted troops to find a weak point. In theory, it's perfect. In practice, it's a death trap, and here's why. The hollow square works when you're facing an enemy that needs to close with you to do damage. If cavalry charges your lines, your infantry braces, locks shields, presents spears, and the horses either stop or impale themselves. The riders can't break through disciplined heavy infantry in close formation. That's Roman doctrine. That's what they've trained for. That's what's worked against Gauls and Germans and Numidians and every other cavalry force they've encountered. But the Parthians aren't charging. They're circling at a distance of maybe 150 yards, just outside the effective range of Roman javelins, and they're shooting continuously. The composite bows they're using are engineering marvels, laminated wood and horn and sinew that store enormous energy and release it with enough force to drive an arrow through a bronze cuirass at close range. At the distance they're maintaining, the armor helps, but it's not enough. Arrows are finding gaps, hitting exposed flesh, punching through weakened sections of armor, dropping into the formation from above. The Romans can't respond. Their javelins, the pila they carry, are designed for close-range impact, thrown at charging enemies right before contact. They're heavy, unbalanced, meant to punch through shields and armor at 20 or 30 yards. Past that range they're ineffective. The Romans try anyway. Soldiers hurl their pila at the circling Parthians, and the javelins fall short, landing in the sand, wasted. The Parthians don't even have to dodge. They just keep riding, keep shooting. The legionaries have slings, some of them, and light infantry with bows, but they're hopelessly outmatched. Roman bows are simple self-bows, weaker and shorter-ranged than Parthian composite bows. Roman slingers are accurate but slow. They're trying to hit fast-moving targets at maximum range while under fire themselves. A few Parthians go down maybe, but it doesn't matter. There are 10,000 of them, and they can afford losses. The Romans can't. So the square stands there, absorbing punishment, and the sun climbs higher. It's mid-morning now, maybe 10 o'clock, and the temperature is rising past 100 degrees. The men are wearing armor, bronze or iron cuirasses, helmets, carrying heavy shields, standing in tight formation where body heat compounds. They're sweating through their tunics, dehydrating, and they can't break formation to drink water because that would create gaps the Parthians might exploit. Officers are trying to maintain morale. Centurions walk the lines, shouting encouragement, threatening punishment for anyone who breaks ranks, but you can only inspire men for so long when they're being used as target practice. A soldier takes an arrow in the shoulder, screams, stumbles. The men on either side of him hold him up, keep him in formation, because if he falls, he creates a gap. Another arrow hits a shield, splinters it, the soldier drops it and tries to crouch behind his neighbor's shield. Another man takes an arrow in the thigh, another in the foot, another in the face, because he looked up at the wrong moment. The casualties are mounting, not quickly enough to collapse the formation immediately, but steadily, relentlessly, mathematically. 10,000 archers shooting 1 arrow per minute, which is a conservative estimate. That's 10,000 arrows per minute hitting a packed formation. Not all of them find flesh, most hit shields or armor or the ground, but even if only 1% of arrows cause casualties, that's 100 men wounded or killed every minute. 6,000 per hour. The math is brutal. Crassus is watching this from inside the square, mounted, trying to project confidence, and he's realizing that his army is being bled to death. He needs the Parthians to charge. He needs close combat. He needs something, anything, that isn't this. That's why he sends Publius. It's not just aggressive tactics, it's desperation. They can't stand here all day. They'll die. Publius rides out with his mixed force, cavalry and infantry, about 6,000 men, and the Parthians immediately retreat. It looks like they're scared. It looks like they're breaking. Publius doesn't realize that Shauna has planned for this. The Parthian commander knows the Romans will eventually try to force engagement, and he's prepared a response. The horse archers retreating in front of Publius aren't fleeing, they're leading, pulling him away from the main army, stretching his formation, creating distance. The retreat goes on for miles. The Roman cavalry is galloping, trying to catch the Parthians, and the infantry is running behind them, breaking formation because they're trying to keep up. It's exactly what Shauna wants. Publius is so focused on the enemy in front of him that he doesn't see the trap closing behind him until it's too late. The Parthians wheel around. The cataphracts appear. These aren't horse archers, these are heavy cavalry, both rider and horse armored in overlapping scales or lamella plate, carrying 12-foot lances, trained to charge in formation and punch through enemy lines. They're the anvil to the horse archer's hammer, and Publius has just positioned himself perfectly to be crushed between them. His 6,000 men are now surrounded in open terrain with no support. The cataphracts charge from one side, lances leveled, and the impact is devastating. Horses and riders go down. The Gallic cavalry tries to countercharge, but they're lighter, less armored, and they're exhausted from the chase. The Parthian lances are longer, giving them reach advantage. Men are spitted on lance points before they can get close enough to use their swords. The horse archers close the circle. They're shooting at point-blank range now, not bothering with high-arcing shots, just direct fire into the packed Roman formation. The infantry, the legionaries Publius brought with him, try to form a defensive square like the main army, shields locked, but they're in the open with no baggage train, no reserves, and no hope. Arrows are hitting them from every direction. The Gauls try one last desperate charge. They grab the Parthian lances with their bare hands, trying to yank riders off their horses. Some succeed, dragging cataphracts down into the dirt where they can be killed, but the Parthian armor is so thick that even on the ground, they're hard to finish. And for every Parthian pulled down, 3 Gauls die. The charge collapses. The survivors fall back. Publius is wounded by now, an arrow in his sword arm, possibly multiple wounds. The sources aren't clear. He can't fight. He can't escape. He's watching his men die around him, and he knows what capture means. The Parthians don't take high-value prisoners for ransom. They take them for humiliation. He orders one of his shield-bearers to kill him. The man refuses at first, so Publius draws a dagger with his offhand and does it himself, or maybe the shield-bearer finally complies. Either way, Publius Crassus dies by Roman hands to avoid Parthian captivity. The rest of his force is annihilated. Some try to surrender and are cut down anyway. Some fight to the last man. A few, very few, manage to break through the Parthian lines and run back toward the main army. Most die where they stand. The Parthians kill everyone, loot the bodies, collect Roman weapons and armor as trophies, and then they take Publius's head, stick it on a spear, and ride back to show Crassus what happens when you try to fight them. The main army, still standing in square formation, still taking arrow fire, sees the Parthian cavalry approaching with the head held high, and morale disintegrates. The men aren't professional legionaries anymore. They're terrified conscripts watching their general's son's head paraded in front of them. Some soldiers start crying. Others stand in silence. A few break ranks and are immediately ordered back by centurions who threaten to kill anyone who runs. Crassus tries to rally them. He rides along the lines giving speeches about Roman honor and duty and his personal grief not mattering compared to the mission. It's hollow, the mission is dead. Everyone knows it. They're trapped in the desert, surrounded by an enemy they can't touch, dying slowly under the sun, and the general's son just got butchered trying to do something about it. The afternoon becomes a test of endurance. The Parthians keep circling, keep shooting. The Romans stand and die. Men are collapsing from heat exhaustion now, not just arrow wounds. Dehydration is setting in. Soldiers are drinking from their canteens, running out of water, and there's nowhere to resupply. The baggage train is in the center of the square, but it's under constant fire, and anyone who tries to move supplies forward is exposed. By late afternoon, Crassus makes the decision to retreat. They can't stay here. They'll all die. Carrhae is close, maybe 5 miles away, a town with walls and water. If they can reach it, they can fortify, hold out, maybe send messengers to Syria for reinforcements. It's not a good plan, but it's the only plan left. The retreat begins. The square starts moving, trying to maintain formation while walking backward, keeping shields facing outward. It's nearly impossible. The moment they start moving, the Parthians press harder. They ride in closer, shoot faster, target the rear of the formation where men are facing the wrong way and can't see the arrows coming. Soldiers fall. The formation starts to stretch. Gaps appear. Units at the rear are getting cut off. A cohort turns to cover the retreat and finds itself surrounded, isolated from the main body. The Parthians swarm them. The cohort dies in minutes. The rest of the army keeps moving, faster now, discipline breaking down, soldiers starting to run. Officers scream orders, trying to hold the formation together, but fear is contagious. Men see their friends running and they run too. The last few miles to Carrhae become a running battle. The Parthians are riding alongside the retreating Romans, shooting into the flanks, picking off stragglers. Some Romans break completely and sprint for the town, abandoning their shields, their armor, anything that slows them down. The Parthians ride them down, shoot them in the back, leave their bodies in the sand. The survivors reach Carrhae at dusk. They stagger through the gates, maybe 25,000 men left, and they collapse. The town isn't prepared for this. There isn't enough food, enough water, enough medical supplies. The wounded are everywhere, screaming, bleeding, dying. Crassus is in shock. His officers are arguing. Cassius is shouting that they need to evacuate immediately, tonight, march back to the Euphrates before the Parthians regroup. Others argue they need to rest. The men can't march, they'll collapse. Crassus doesn't respond. He's sitting in silence, staring at nothing. His son is dead. His army is destroyed. Everything he planned, everything he wanted, gone. He's broken. They decide to evacuate without him, essentially. Cassius takes command, organizes the withdrawal, and they leave at night, abandoning the wounded because there's no way to move them. The wounded men scream as the army marches away. Some beg to be killed rather than left for the Parthians. A few officers stay behind with soldiers who refuse to leave their dying friends. Most of the army just goes, stumbling through the darkness, no torches, no clear direction, just desperation. The night march is chaos. Units get separated in the dark. Soldiers lose their way, wander off into the desert, are never seen again. Crassus is among the group heading north toward the hills, following Cassius's lead, but he's barely functional. He's not giving orders, not making decisions, just following. They reach rough terrain by morning, hills where cavalry can't easily pursue, and they hide. The Parthians control the plain. There's no food, no water, no way out. They're trapped. That's when Shauna sends the message offering to negotiate. It's an obvious trap. Everyone knows it's a trap. But Crassus has no other options. Cassius argues against it, begs Crassus not to go, but Crassus either doesn't care anymore or he's desperate enough to believe there's a chance. He walks down to meet Shauna. The meeting is tense from the start. Shauna offers Crassus a horse, a deliberate insult because Roman commanders don't walk while inferiors ride. Crassus hesitates. His officers are nervous. Someone, we don't know who, either draws a weapon or makes a threatening move. The Parthian guards react. There's a scuffle, swords are drawn, and in the confusion Marcus Licinius Crassus is killed. The accounts differ on whether it was intentional murder or a chaotic melee. It doesn't really matter. The result is the same. The richest man in Rome, co-ruler of the Republic, dies in the dirt in a minor skirmish with guards, and the Parthians take his head and hand as trophies. They send the head to King Orodes, who's in Armenia watching a play, and it arrives during the performance. The actor uses it as a prop. The audience laughs. Later someone fills Crassus's mouth with molten gold, a symbolic gesture about greed. The body is left where it fell. The surviving Romans scatter. Some make it back to Syria, most don't. The aftermath is political as much as military. Rome loses 20,000 men and 7 eagle standards, symbols of legion honor. It's humiliating, but it's not existential. Rome has lost armies before and recovered. The Republic doesn't collapse because of Carrhae, but the balance of power shifts. With Crassus dead, there's no mediator between Pompey and Caesar. The Triumvirate dissolves. Caesar finishes conquering Gaul, returns to Italy, and crosses the Rubicon. Civil war erupts. Pompey is defeated and killed. The Republic tears itself apart. Augustus rises from the ashes and establishes the empire. You can trace a line from Carrhae to the end of the Republic, because Crassus's death removed the only man capable of holding Caesar and Pompey together. And the Parthians? Shauna is executed within a year, killed by his own king who fears his success. The Parthian Empire doesn't expand westward. The frontier stabilizes. Both empires turn inward to deal with succession crises and internal problems. The lost eagles become a symbol, a stain on Roman honor, and Augustus later negotiates their return through diplomacy, calling it a great victory even though no battles are fought. Future emperors will try to conquer Parthia. Trajan will briefly succeed, marching all the way to the Persian Gulf, but his successor Hadrian will abandon the conquests, deciding they're unsustainable. Rome and Parthia will fight for another century and a half, border skirmishes and raids, but no decisive victory for either side. The Battle of Carrhae establishes the pattern. Rome is superior in pitched infantry battles, Parthia dominates in mobile warfare, and neither can decisively defeat the other. The lesson of Carrhae is simple: competence beats arrogance. Shauna won because he had a plan, he understood his enemy's strengths and weaknesses, and he exploited both. Crassus lost because he assumed being Roman was enough, that legions couldn't lose to cavalry, that wealth and political power meant military genius. He was wrong, and 40,000 men paid for his mistake. If this story taught you something, if it made you think about how arrogance kills and competence matters, then do me a favor. Hit that like button so more people see this. Drop a comment about what you want covered next. Subscribe because we're telling these stories every week, history that's real and brutal and worth your time. That's all I'm asking. Now go learn something else. There are more battles, more disasters, more moments where everything hung in the balance, and we're covering all of them.